You're listening to the UAE's #1 talk radio station.
This is The Agenda with Georgia Tolley
On Dubai Eye 103.8.
Hello there, and thank you for downloading The Agenda's podcast from the 1st of July. Now on the programme today, we discussed the new savings pension plan, which as of today has been rolled out to expat employees working for the Dubai government. We spoke to Jacques Jean-Visser. He is the Chief Legal Officer for the DIFC. He told us how it works, and we discussed how everyone can save for their retirement, both here and at home, with Sajeev Nair from Zurich Workplace Solutions and Steve Cronin from Dead Simple Saving. We also found out why it's worth getting second citizenship. That was with Jeffrey Hensler, the founder of Passport Legacy. And Zena spoke to the explorer who's just discovered the deepest shipwreck ever. It's nearly 4 miles under the sea in the Philippines. Plus, as the plastic bag fee is introduced in Dubai today, we heard from the Chief Sustainability Officer for Majid Al Futtaim Holding, which also operates Carrefour. I've got quite a personal question for you this Friday morning. Do you have a pension? I am quite happy to come out and say I do not have a pension. Actually, that's not entirely true. I have about 4 years of pension because I was staff for the BBC for about 4 years. But other than that, I've basically been freelance most of my working life. And also out here, there isn't really such a thing as a pension for expats. But the good news is that system is gradually changing. And in fact, today, the new savings pension plan for non-Emirati employees working for the Dubai government has come into effect. It's based on the DEWS system, which was introduced and is sponsored by the DIFC. It was brought into place in February 2020 there. At present, this scheme is only open to expats working for the government and, of course, those who work in the DIFC. But it could be expanded to the private sector on a voluntary basis. Could. Now, that is the important word. Could. I'd like to add in when, but that is exactly why we're doing the topic on the radio today, because I'm joined in the studio by Sajeev Nair. He's from Zurich Workplace Solutions, who are responsible for administering the savings scheme. Sajeev, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
It's lovely to have you here. Still not got over the joy of guests in studio. It's a brilliant place to be, and it's lovely to have you with us.
Likewise.
Now, tell me, are you excited about the launch of the new scheme today?
Very, very, very excited.
I
can't hide that. This is a momentous occasion for Dubai as an economy, for the employers in Dubai and for the employees in Dubai. It's a watershed moment.
Really, I love that because it's a geeky finance system, but we should be excited about it.
Absolutely. And if I may just outline why this is momentous, right? So it's momentous for the economy because from an economic perspective, you're providing assurance and employee protection, number one. Number two, you're looking at talent. So this is a talent game. This is about attracting and retaining talent in the region. And the third piece from an economic perspective is through schemes like this, you're building institutional investment capability in the economy and therefore contributing to the GDP of the economy. So that's the economic perspective. For employers, it's two key things. Talent again, this is foundational for attracting and retaining talent, and it is the easiest way for you to manage your end of service benefits liability. Last but not the least, for the employees, okay, this is about protection, financial savings. Okay, you can, there is transparency, flexibility available in it. And this is assurance that you will get paid when you leave your service. So it is addressing the entire spectrum. And this is momentous.
It is very reassuring. I have to say, I was only chatting to my husband about it about a week ago because his company, he works for a law firm, but he's not in the DIFC. And I was like, I'm sure you're going to be able to get one of these pension schemes soon. You should ask your HR about it. And he was like, no, you just can't do it. And there's a real unwillingness among people to sort of to acknowledge and to think ahead and to realize that, you know, we're in our 40s and you're supposed to start even in your 30s and your 20s. You need to think about planning for your pension.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have also been speaking to Jacques John Visser. Now, he's the Chief Legal Officer for the DIFC. Sadly, he couldn't join us in the studio today, but we sent him over some questions. Zena sent him over some questions, and he's answered them very kindly for us. And so one of the big ones here is who exactly will be able to contribute? And Jacques answered that for us.
From February 2020, when the DEWS plan was originally launched in the DIFC until now, contributions could only be made into the DEWS plan in respect of expatriate DIFC employees. These contributions included both statutory end-of-service benefits contributions by DIFC employers that had to be made under the DIFC employment law, as well as any voluntary savings that DIFC employees themselves wish to make into the plan. What will happen now is that the mandatory end-of-service contribution responsibility of the Dubai government in respect of its expatriate employees will going forward also be paid into the DEWS plan. In addition, Emirati government employees will now also be able to save into the DEWS plan on a voluntary basis, over and above their normal pension contributions to the General Pensions and Social Security Authority.
That is really interesting, isn't it? So both Emiratis and non-Emiratis can use the system.
Absolutely. So on a mandatory basis, it's important to recognize the difference here, right? So expatriate employees, their employers contribute on a mandatory basis on their behalf. And remember, there is no salary deduction. This is a benefit that is payable to the employee. And both expat employees and the Emirati nationals can contribute into the scheme on a voluntary basis.
Is that just a bit like having a decent savings account, or is it a bit fancier than that?
It is a little bit fancier than that because it provides first and foremost, you are doing this through a workplace savings account. So it's a workplace savings scheme. It's well regulated. There's a lot of controls in place. The money is held in trust for the benefit of the employee. It's much more competitive than what you would get in the retail space. And you have a range of investment options that you can choose aligned with what your risk appetite is.
So one of my friends does work in DIFC. She's got the app. And it's cool. And you can really change your risk appetite really quickly. Almost with like a flick of the button, month by month.
On a daily basis, multiple times a day if you like.
Really?
Absolutely. So, and there is no switching charges in it. So it's a very simple commercial model, recognizing that this is a large change, right? So we've tried to keep it as simple as possible for people to understand this. So you can use the app to change between your investment options, the fund. You can, in fact, split your investments across multiple funds, and that can be done with a click of a few buttons on the app, and there's no charge for switching. It's
really cleverly created, actually, because I have other sort of savings accounts, and believe me, they're a lot more complicated. Even the process of logging in and trying to figure out where you are and what you're doing and what ETF you're investing in. We found that very complicated. And so the fact that this app makes it so easy, I think is really important. One of the things that I'm sure we could have asked you, but we asked Jacques John Visser from DIFC, is whether or not people can actually choose their contributions. Now, this is what he had to say.
The mandatory contributions of employers are a function of what needs to be paid by law, which is then extrapolated into a relevant percentage of an employee's monthly basic salary based on their length of service and which law is applicable to the employer concerned. Voluntary contributions by employees, on the other hand, is decided upon by the employees themselves, but can, for regulatory and mostly anti-money laundering related reasons, not be in excess of their actual salary.
Well, because that would look dodgy, frankly. Okay, so let's just break that down a bit. What are the mandatory payments that the employer is required to make? Is this instead of your end of service benefit?
That is correct. So let's take the example of DIFC companies. There are 1,500 companies in the DIFC who are enrolled into the plan. And as of today, 61 odd government entities will start enrolling into the plan. From the day of enrollment, they make a monthly contribution. And the question is, how is this monthly contribution calculated, right? There are rules that are in place in the labor law that says if you are, I'll give you one example, and there's small deviations, I'll come back to that. But let's take somebody is entitled to 21 days of end of service gratuity for less than 5 years of service. Okay, that's a simple example. Now, 21 days so you divide 21 by 360. In the case of DIFC, it's divided by 360 days, and you get a number that is 5.83%. Okay, that is what 5.83% of your salary is what the employer contributes on your behalf into DEWS. Okay. Now, the contribution percentages could differ. It could be 8.33. The employer could choose to contribute more if they want to attract talent, but the minimum has to be what is mandated by law. And there are differences in specific government entities based on their internal policies. So we will, adopt that as employees enroll.
So there's two things I was interested by that. So our because obviously this has been running in DIFC for a couple of years now. Are there employers who are putting in more than necessary?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
How? What sort of percentage?
It's different. There are people who are putting in 10%, 12%, but the minimum is that you need to, have at least a minimum based on what the labor law requires. But at the end of the day, it's a talent attraction tool, right?
Yeah.
So it does not prevent employers from putting in more.
Because that's quite exciting, because that's much more like a pension that you would have in the United Kingdom, for example, where the employer matches the employee's contributions or gives them, I mean, even in those situations, the employee can add more if they want to. So that is making it much more like European democracy, I suppose.
It is, I would call it, it's not exactly a pension scheme. It's a workplace savings scheme because you don't get at the end, your money is not locked until you retire and you don't get a monthly drawdown. So it's a workplace savings scheme. You technically have access to the funds. If you choose to leave it in there, that's fine, but you can withdraw it when you terminate or your employment relationship terminates. But it is a talent attraction tool, right? It is it does allow you to differentiate vis-a-vis competition by adding in more.
How about the employees? My goodness me, I'm falling over that word a lot this morning. How about the staff? Are they choosing to invest more on top of the contributions that their employer is making?
Yes, we are seeing an increase. So when this started, there are two areas where we're seeing inflow into the DEWS account, right? So one is employers choosing to transfer their accrued gratuity. So from the date of enrollment is when the employers are expected to contribute on a monthly basis. The previous accrued gratuity continues to remain with the employer, right? But we are seeing that about over 300 employers inside of DIFC have chosen to transfer their previous accrued gratuity into the DEWS plan. So that it's not just people talking great things through surveys, it's people talking with their money and moving it into the DEWS plan. The second key development we're seeing is that we are seeing a lot of employees making voluntary contributions, and that number is increasing. So we have probably over 1,000 people now making out of a population of 25,000, and that is increasing.
It's so interesting to catch up on all of this. I've got several more questions, not least that key question, which whether it's going to be rolled out to the rest of us, to non-DIFC, non-government employee expats. My husband, basically, is what it comes down to. It's like, when are we going to start investing in a pension scheme, please? So we will be keeping you with us, if that's all right. We're going to come back in just a few minutes' time. I do have Sajeev Nair from the Zurich Workplace Solutions. Now, they administer this savings scheme that is being rolled out to non-Emirati employees who are working for the Dubai government. And it starts today. Yes, that will be coming into place in just, literally, I suppose it started this morning, didn't it?
This is The Agenda.
On Dubai Eye 103.8, the UAE's #1 talk radio station.
We are discussing the future of pensions on the programme today, hopefully sorting out our retirement so we can spend our silver years cruising round the Med. That's a little bit of a mirror on what I want to be doing. I have kept Sajeev Nair from Zurich Workplace Solutions in the studio with me, taking your questions. Now, they administer the pension savings scheme for the DEWS plan, which, as we just mentioned, is being expanded from the DIFC to include expats who are working in government offices. Okay, so the first thing, thank you so much for staying with me, Sajeev, first of all. The big question that I've got, and it's sort of an impatient one in some ways, is that it's all very well, these expats that get to work for government offices. And how many government offices are there?
61 entities.
You see, that's pretty good. That's quite a lot of people. But still, that there's a lot of us who don't work for, I mean, I won't count anyway because I'm freelance, but there's lots of people who don't work for government entities. So we wanted to find out whether or not it's going to be rolled out further. So first up, we spoke to Jacques John Visser. He is the Chief Legal Officer for the DIFC. We asked him this question, and this is what he had to say.
The plan is that there will be a voluntary rollout to the private sector later this year. However, this is very much dependent on the cooperation of the Ministry of Human Resources and Immunitisation, and we are currently working on this with them. Our plan is in Q3 of this year, but as I said, this is dependent on the assistance of the Federal Ministry, who have very much expressed a willingness to assist in this regard. A fairly broad marketing campaign is planned for this, so you will know when it happens.
I love that. We'll know when it happens, Sajeev. It's Q3 now, isn't it? That's what Zena said to me this morning, 1st of July. Doesn't that move us into Q3?
Almost, yes.
So, I mean, this is hugely exciting. It could be rolled out to more of us.
It could be rolled out to more of us. It's important to understand that this is a huge change. Okay, the biggest aspect in our 2 years of running the scheme. It's the education element, right? And maintaining a common, simple narrative is so important for, like I said, it's a momentous occasion. We're changing a lot of things. The impact is humongous. But in implementing that, it needs a very simple narrative. We cannot underestimate the importance of education. So it's not just a question of saying, let's just publish a law and off we go. There are hundreds of thousands of people that need to be brought along in this journey. The pilot has been successful, 25,000 people on the plan, but it's been a lot of work to get them aligned. So yes, sometime this year, as Jacques said, sometime this year we get a go ahead to move on a voluntary basis into the private sector. But it will need a lot of education. It will need to maintain a shared narrative across the Emirate of Dubai.
Because in that situation, you're not necessarily. I always presume that people who work in the DIFC or in government offices are on pretty decent salaries. You sort of imagine that they're in the top tier of the sort of salary stratosphere. But if you're going to open it to the wider population on a voluntary basis, then you could be talking about people who are on much less. They're on, 10,000 dirhams a month or 5,000 dirhams a month. But they also want to save safely for the future and save their final gratuity payment. Do you think that when it's rolled out, it will include people from every salary bracket, or do you think, again, that will be a gradual process?
The intent, based on the line of sight I have on the discussions, the intent very much is to cover the entire population, because
Wow.
that strata of the that demographic of the working population, it could be argued they need the most protection. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's also important to understand what it means when we say it's going to be rolled out on a voluntary basis. Who is signing up? It's actually the employer that's signing up. Right. So it's the employer that's signing up into the scheme. So when we say we're opening it up to on a voluntary basis, onshore into the Emirate of Dubai, we are saying that we are calling upon employers who care about their employees to join the scheme.
So that's excellent, because that puts the emphasis, the responsibility on the employer to educate their staff, whether they're financially literate or, in the case of me, not.
It's a very interesting point, right? So first hurdle to cross is educating the employers themselves, okay? And then supporting them in educating their employees. And here I would give a huge shout out to the HR teams within DIFC who've been tremendous change champions. They're pretty much part of our extended, team, if you will, and they have been so critical to the success of the scheme. They've been championing this cause. They've understood the scheme, and they have made sure that they relay that to their employees.
Okay, so I understand that a nice lump gratuity sum is reassuring. You know where you stand with that. You know when you're going to get it, hopefully, and you know what it's going to be. So I can imagine that some people feel a little bit uncertain about investing in a savings scheme. Can it go down as well as go up?
So it's very important to understand that investments is a medium to long-term game, right? I don't look at my app on a daily basis.
That's very sensible right now.
Markets go up and markets go down. It is always a question of, and this is where I don't want to get into a financial advice end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But it's fair to say that, the funds here are curated for the demographics that we are addressing. Okay.
Yeah.
The range covers it's a broad range that covers people who really don't want to take any risk to people who would like to take more risk, right? And generally what we see, and this is me as a person looking at the market and saying, well, there are only two factors that typically drive individuals, either fear or greed, right? And as long as you don't try timing the market, right, and just investing, and as an individual, I can say my philosophy to life is just invest on a regular basis. Try not to time the market and stay in it medium to long term. That's my personal view, right?
Okay, so you make the decision to join it. Well, your employer makes the decision. That gives you the option as an employee to join in. What happens if you then change jobs? Does it then stop and then you start again with your new employer?
So you have a couple of options, right? One, let's assume there's one scenario where you've moved from an employer who is in DEWS to an employer who's not enrolled into DEWS, right? At that point in time, you have a few options. You can stay invested, okay? The charging remains the same. You're not charged extra for staying in the plan. You can withdraw fully, or you can withdraw partially. Okay, so that those options exist, and we are seeing that people do stay in the plan. Okay, a lot of people actually stay in the plan. The other option is you move to an employer that is also on DEWS. Then there is a new account that is opened in DEWS on behalf of that new employer.
What's great is that I can't catch you out. It's all really clear. And that's what you want from a new financial product, ultimately. It's all been thought out. It's all very clear. It's all very reassuring. And certainly if you're investing what is essentially supposed to be your pension pot into a scheme, you definitely want it to be that. So thank you very much for taking the time to come and speak to us about it. We hope to have you back when the announcement comes round that it's been open to everyone else. I hope it's not during the summer holidays when I'm away. So you just tell the Department for the Ministry for Human Resources and Emiratisation just to hold fire till August. That would be lovely. But Sajeev Nair has been in the studio with us taking your questions. He's from Zurich Workplace Solutions. They administer the DEWS plan, which is being expanded from the DIFC to include expats working for government offices as of today. Thank you, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much.